Chapter 5, Sale of Goods. The nature of sale of goods under Sale of Goods Act 1957. The definition of the term goods is Section 2, SOGA 1957. Every kind of movable property other than actionable claims and money, and includes stock and shares, growing crops, grass, and things attached to or forming part of the land which are agreed to be severed before sale or under the contract of sale. 2. Classification of good. They have 5 classification of good. The first one is existing, future, specific, uncertain, and ascertain. Existing, Section 6, Clause 1, goods owned or possessed by the seller. Second, future, Section 2, goods which are to be manufactured or produced or acquired by the seller after the making of the contract. Third one, specific, Section 2, goods identified and agreed at the time the contract is made. Number 4, unascertain. First, the goods exist but it is not ascertain yet at the time the contract is made. 3 categories. First, goods to be manufactured or grown by the seller. And number 5, ascertain. Goods not ascertain at the time of the contract but become ascertain after selection by the buyer or seller. Next, definition on the contract of sale. Section 4, Clause 1, SOGA 1957. A contract of sale of goods is a contract wherein the seller transfers or agrees to transfer the property in goods to the buyer for a price. In other words, a sale occurs when the ownership of property in goods passes to the buyer. This means that there must be goods, money consideration, and transfer of property.
Caveat emptor rules and its exceptions. The time of caveat emptor, the buyer could not cover from the seller for defect on the property that rendered the property unfit for ordinary purpose. Second, according to the general rules under the common law, the buyer is expected to exercise care in making purchases. This rule is known as caveat emptor, which means the buyer must beware. Third, it is for the buyer to satisfy himself as to the quality of the goods for the goods purchases. If he is careless, he must bear the consequences. Section C, Clause 1, Clause A, SOGA 1957. This section provides that there is an implied condition that the goods must be reasonable fit to the particular purpose of the buyer. If the goods are not fit for particular purpose of the buyer, the seller will be liable for breach of this condition and the buyer is entitled to damages or rescinds the contract. Exceptions. Number 1. Buyer makes known to seller the particular purpose for which the goods are required so as to show that he relies on the seller's skill and judgment. Example of the case is Grant vs. Australian Knitting Mills, 1936. Number 2. The goods are of description which in the course of the seller's business to supply. Example of the case is Griffith vs. Peter Conway Ltd, 1939. Okay. 5.3. Transfer of property and title of the goods. The concept of property and possession. One should distinguish the concept of property, ownership, and that of possession. The passing of property in good does not necessarily mean that possession also passes with it and vice versa. 5.3.2. The passing of the property from seller to the buyer. Section 1823 CA 1950. Number 1. Sale of unascertained good. Number 2. Sale of specific or ascertained good. Number 3. Sale of specific good in a deliverable state. Number 4. Sale of specific good to be put into deliverable state. Number 5. sale of specific good in the deliverable state, but the seller has to do something in order to ascertain the price. Number 6. Sale of unascertained of future good by description and appropriation. Section 26 CA 1950. The goods remain at the seller risk until the property is transferred to the buyer, but when the property is transferred to the buyer, the goods are at the buyer risk whether delivery has been made or not, provide that where delivery has been delayed through the fault of either buyer or seller, the goods are at the risk of the party in fault as regards any loss. That's all. Thank you. 5.4. Describe the protection to buyers and owners. Explain caveat emptor principle. Caveat emptor is a Latin term that means that the buyer beware, similar to the phrase sold as is. This term means that the buyer assumes the risk that a product may fail to meet expectation or have defects. Number 2, in other words, the principle of caveat emptor serves as a warning that the buyers have no recourse with the seller if the product does not meet their expectation. 3. Under the principle of caveat emptor, the buyer could not recover damage from the seller for defect on the property that rendered the property unfit for ordinary purpose. Number 4, the only exception was if the seller actively concealed latent defects or otherwise made material misrepresentation amounting to fraud. That's all. Thank you.
Full year. The principle of Nemo quote non-habit and the exception. Section 27 Soga 1957, where goods are sold by a person who is not the owner therefore, and who does not sell them under the authority or with the consent of the owner, the buyer acquires no better title to the goods than the seller had. Second, this general rule comes from the maximum Nemo quote non-habit, which means no one can transfer a better title than he has himself. Therefore, if the goods are purchased from a person who is not the owner, the buyer does not give a title even if he is paid for value in good faith. Okay, the exception. First, by estoppel. Estoppel is when the owner of the goods by his own conduct makes it appear to a buyer that the person who sells the good has the owner's authority to sell, and the buyer acts irreliant on it. In such situation, the owner will be stopped from denying the seller's authority to sell. The buyer who buys in good faith or for value will get a good title by estoppel. Okay, second, sell by mercantile agent. To be a mercantile agent, the person must have the authority to deal with the goods from the true owner of the goods. Initially, a mercantile agent is not the owner of the good. However, if the mercantile agent sells the goods to a buyer, the buyer will get a root title over the goods. Okay, third, sale by one of joint owner. This happens in the situation of goods which owned jointly by several persons. A sale by one of these joint owner may effectively transfer title to the buyer. Okay, number 4, sell under a voidable title. Where the seller of good has obtained possession under a contract voidable, but the contract has not been rescinded at the time of the sale. The buyer acquires a good title to the goods provided he buys them in good faith and without notice of the seller's defect title. Okay, number 5, sell by a seller in possession after sale. This happens when a seller has transferred the property in goods to a buyer but remains in possession of the goods. The seller then sells the goods to another buyer who buys the goods in good faith. In this situation, the second buyer will get a good title. The first buyer loses his title and he has get to remedy against the seller. Okay, the last one, sell by a buyer possession. In this situation, the buyer obtains possession with the consent of the seller. However, the property in the goods is still subject to some rights of interest of the seller. Such buyer can pass a good title to another found buyer who has no knowledge about the rights or interests of the original seller. Okay, thank you.